Hello, this is Farrageist, and welcome to the Anarchist State. So, there's been a lot of things on the news lately due to some of the mass shootings that have occurred about banning firearms, mandatory buybacks, and other gun control options. I think there's a lack of understanding out there about how exactly this is going to work. Uh, the right to bear arms is guaranteed by the Constitution. In addition, all of the things that they talk about, including mandatory buybacks, banning assault weapons, isn't going to change the fact that there are mass killings out there. If you look back through history, there have been numerous times where governments around the world have attempted to ban firearms to limit civilian ownership of firearms. And for the most part, they've turned out horribly. Look at Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, some of the current situations in Venezuela, where the military is running over civilians with vehicles, and what recourse do the civilians have? It's not the right way to go about things. It's not going to solve the issue. Australia had a mandatory buyback. They claim that it's reduced the mass killings. However, there may not have been any mass shootings, but there have been other mass killings. It's going to happen. It's an unfortunate fact in this world that people are going to do things that they shouldn't. They don't require guns, a match and gasoline, knives, axes, vehicles, aircraft. They can all be used to kill large numbers of people at one time. Banning firearms isn't going to stop that. It's hard to say what the best method of reducing these incidents is. It needs to be a multifaceted approach. If you look at a lot of the things, a lot of the incidents that occurred, the individuals who enacted those incidents were had mental issues, had emotional issues. Now, I don't blame it specifically on antidepressants, antipsychotics, or say that everyone who has a emotional issue should be banned from owning firearms. That's not going to solve the issue either. But it is something that needs to be taken into account. We got to look into improving the mental health system in this country. We need to look at improving the mental health system throughout the world. Growing up, I'll say it flat out. I had incidents of depression, of anxiety. At no point did I ever think about going out and shooting a whole bunch of people. One, it wouldn't make me feel better. Two, it turns me into a complete and total asshole. And it's just not worth it. Now, I don't expect everybody to be like me and to have that understanding, to have that self control. But it is something that needs to be looked into of how do we get these people the help that they need? Do changes need to be made to the prescription medications that are being put out there so that they don't cause some of the side effects that they do? In addition, let's take a look at the education system. Most schools today have a zero tolerance bully policy. But is it really a zero tolerance bullying policy? Or is it if we don't acknowledge it exists, then it doesn't? I grew up afraid to walk home every day from school. I used to get jumped by groups of kids and beaten up. I was bullied my whole life. And the school did absolutely nothing. They refused to acknowledge that the bullying occurred. And now I see it with my own kids and kids that they go to school with. This so-called zero tolerance thing. Let's acknowledge that it actually occurred. Let's not blame the kids who are being bullied. Let's do something about that. Let's give these kids an outlet, some sort of way to protect themselves, give them people that they can go to who are going to actually acknowledge the situation that's occurring and not just blow it off. You want to reduce the number of mass killings out there? That's a big step in the right direction. Right now, what is the recourse for these kids who are being bullied, who are being picked on? You go to somebody and they ignore it. Man, that it doesn't work. It's not working. It's time for things to change. Now, again, you get rid of firearms, they'll find another way. These are things that need to be addressed. Instead of punishing law-abiding firearms owners, instead of trying to fix something that's not broken. And for those people who say, oh, well, they don't want us to take guns because of the government. Well, yeah, in a sense, that is the case. You're going to tell me that there's no government out there that abuses its power, even today. That there's been no situations where the U.S. government has done things that it should not have done. I mean, you're deluding yourself if you think that way. You're deluding yourself if you think that it can't happen here. It has happened. It will happen in the future. Look at World War II, Japanese internment camps. More recently, look at Operation Fast and Furious. That was a goddamn joke. Let's send guns to South America and Mexico and say that law-abiding gun owners are causing the violence among the cartels. No. They sent all these weapons and then lost track of them. Let's look at some of these organizations that are abusing their authority. Instead of lawmakers making laws, we have private organizations that we didn't elect, that we didn't put into power, that are making determinations, that are making policy, and that can't happen. So, in a sense, the right to bear arms is the final defense of the civilian population, of the people, to protect the way that this country is supposed to be, protect that everything that this country stands for. As far as this ridiculousness about sporting purposes, at no point when the Constitution was framed, when people were acknowledging the right to bear arms, did they say, oh, you can have firearms for hunting, for competition? No. That's not how it worked. It's another argument that comes up. Oh, well, the people who founded the country, the people who wrote the Constitution, it was in a time where people had flintlocks and muskets, and they weren't, the technology wasn't where it is, and they wouldn't want people to have the weapons that currently exist. The revolution was armed initially with civilian weapons. Cannons that were used, the most powerful weapons of the time, came from civilian hands. Companies, shipping companies, and privately owned businesses that had them to protect themselves from pirates. These were the equivalent of weapons of mass destruction at that time, and they were in the hands of civilians, and they were used properly, and sometimes improperly. But saying that weapons that were designed for the military weren't intended to be in the hands of civilians is a joke. Lewis and Clark carried air guns capable of firing 30, 40 rounds in a semi-automatic fashion. the time that was the height of technology. And these, granted, they weren't firearms, they were air guns, but they were capable of killing people. Throughout history, it's been the civilian population, the individuals who are willing to take up arms to defend themselves, defend their country, defend their communities, who have led the way. Whether as a fully formed militia or as a resistance. And by trying to limit the ability of a people to protect themselves, all you're doing is paving the way for tyranny, for corruption, for abuse of power. In all honesty, do you really think the bad guys are going to be turn in their guns, their firearms, if you do a mandatory buyback? You're basically trying to disarm the law-abiding population. The people who are trying to make these policies, they have armed security. They're going to be protected. What about the rest of us? Those of us who aren't millionaires, who have to go every day, who have to live our everyday lives. How are we supposed to protect our family? Look at where most of these mass shootings occur. They're places where people aren't legally permitted to carry firearms. But what protection do they offer? Do they offer armed security? Can they guarantee the safety of the people in there? No. And I'm not saying that everywhere should be open for people to carry firearms in, but let's take a moment and look at the big picture and see that it's more than just one thing that's causing this issue. And removing that one thing isn't going to solve the issue. It's time that we stop trying to be... I'm not even sure how to put it. But more and more I see these things and it kind of scares me. You have a large number of candidates for the upcoming presidential election who seem to be vying to be the one who to be the person who can put their name on the destruction of the last thing that will provide a guarantee of democracy. They're trying to destroy the thing which protects our ability to be free. And that's all they seem to be looking at. They're not looking at the big picture. They're not looking at other ways to fix the issue. They're looking at just firearms. And that's not going to fix the issue. On the other hand, I'm not saying that the other side of the fence is always right either. You can't have two sides that are dividing everybody that much. There's got to be a way to work together to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And that's one thing that politicians from both parties need to understand. When you're elected, you're not just representing the people in your party, the people whose beliefs you share. You're representing everyone. And you need to take their opinions and their views into account and work with them. We can't have one side saying ban everything, one side saying, oh, you can't do anything. Because you're arguing about the wrong thing. You're not going to fix anything doing that. Everybody needs to take a step back and look at the big picture. How do we make things better without interfering with the rights of individuals? And this is something that I do plan on touching on in a later video as well. At this point in time, the United States, this country, is divided in ways that it hasn't for a long time, or hasn't had the impact that it currently does for a long time. And we're in real danger of the country, as it is supposed to be, falling apart. And maybe it's time that we stop attacking each other, we stop dividing, we stop trying to isolate and separate and push people away, and start building bridges that bring us together. Start forming bonds that strengthen us as a people, as a country, as a community. And I apologize if I've been a bit tangential. I think that's the right word. If I've been going off in random directions and I'm not as clear as I'd like to be. But it's a hard topic to talk about because there's such a polarized view of everything. And it's causing a rift between people. And it's one that we can't afford to have. It's the United States of America, not the divided states. It's time we work together. It's time that we all unite and figure out where the issue is and how to actually do something to make it better. As always, any comments, whether positive or negative, are appreciated. If you want to see more of these videos, hit the like button, subscribe. If nothing else, take a few minutes and think about things. How can you bring your community together? How can we make our communities a better place? Before anything else, let's start there. What can we each as individuals do to make our little section of the world, our little section of the country, that a bit better? I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.